following week, I got back to Belfast and Pope John Paul II died. You'll remember he died overnight on a Saturday. And the following afternoon, I got a phone call from my recent ex-girlfriend saying, "Have you seen what they've done at the Annandale embankment?" And I said, "No." And she said, "They've put anti-Catholic graffiti up." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "Well?" And I'm like, "What?" And she said, "Somebody needs to do something about it." And I got the impression that she had a clear sense of who that somebody was. She would have done it herself, actually. But on a red brick wall in a grocery store parking lot, somebody had written in white paint, "Where the fuck is the Pope now? Ha, ha." It was really, really emotionally intelligent. They'd actually spelled out the laughter, you know. And the venom in that was familiar in our society. And it worked both ways. There could have been anti-Protestant graffiti too elsewhere. And I'm sure it was teenage boys. And I'm sure that they weren't sitting and rubbing their hands in some kind of Machiavellian strategy about how can we continue to perpetuate the ethno-religious enmity on the island of Ireland. I'm sure they just had nothing else to do and it was a bit of a laugh. But it still had an impact. And the following day, a Monday, quite likely thousands of people would drive past that wall. All the Catholics would see it and feel some measure of hurt or fear. Some of the Protestants would feel shame, and some of the Protestants would think, "Nice one. Piss down the inside leg before it goes sour." So myself and another guy from Belfast, and in another example of US-American intervention overseas for the common good that works, a guy from Montana who was living in my house at the time. We went out at 4 o'clock the next morning. We had a tin of white paint. We'd forgotten to buy paintbrushes, and you can't get paintbrushes at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I brought a bathroom sponge, and we went over to this wall. We read the passage from Isaiah, or if you're from Ireland, from Isaiah, about turning swords into plowshares. We prayed the prayer known as the Lord's Prayer, and we painted not over the graffiti in such a way to erase it, because we wanted people to see what someone many of us know well calls the best criticism of the bad. We wanted people to see the message that we were transcending. And so on top of "Where the fuck is the Pope now?", we wrote one word 5 times. It is the least used word in politics, and maybe the most important word that we should learn to use authentically, with healthy boundaries, but from the heart. And that word is sorry. And so when people drove past it the next day, they saw the faint outline of "Where the fuck is the Pope now? Ha ha." But in strong white letters, "Sorry, sorry, 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 sorry." I'm not responsible for the graffiti going up in the first place, but part of my lineage probably is. I'm also one of the targets of that graffiti, because I am 50% Indigenous Irish Catholic and 50% Northern Irish British Protestant and 1/8 Polish Jew. And the joy of this, I bet something as complicated is true in your life as well. There's already something in you that is a point of commonality with someone who you might consider to be at least different, if not your opponent. And again, I know we need boundaries and we need agreements about no first strike, but maybe we need to make that agreement within ourselves first about what heart we're going to come from in terms of how we humanize even our enemies. This is a blessing for the conflict into which you were born. Maybe you were born into an even more intense conflict than the one in and about the north of Ireland, or maybe the conflict you've known was less physically aggressive, and yet it's still valid as a source of wounding in your life, and it may be a portal to a gift that you have to offer the world that we're in right now. For the conflict into which you were born, It's been with you from the start, to the point where it sometimes feels like it was the start. And that's in part because it started before you did. You were the ping pong ball, but they were using baseball bats. You smashed between them and divided against yourself. Their mutual enmity blinded them to how it left you feeling that it was all your fault, that somehow you were polluted, toxic, split down the middle, broken. Decades of that split have left you still at war with your own selves, at war with your own molecules, unable to protect the opposing sides from each other, never mind reconcile them. It is time for a peace process for yourself. Not a sweeping under the rug, nor a denial of the need for sane boundaries. Indeed, a true peace process is a sanity process too. You are bigger than the conflict you were born into. Your sanity has been protected by the part of you that knows the world you've been living in is itself insane. Your sense of what was broken comes from your sanity. Your sense of sorrow comes from your sense of love. So may what did not, could not happen for them now happen for you. May the fault lines uncrack and rebind themselves with new agents. The tenderness of a heart that wants to treat others only as it would want for itself, and the character to act that way. Step into the role to which you are ordained. A wounded healer, but a healer nonetheless, who knows his own soul is worthy of as much healing as both the most vulnerable among us and those who did not know how to pass on only the best of themselves.
But I think what was most striking for me in the conversation, listening to so many of you that were in the room, was that what you're doing here at Illumin is really bringing you into this place of embodied presence. That you often, in what you do in Circle, and what you do together, and what you do here at Awaken, you're already practicing so much of what's required to be a bridger, to be a bridge builder, to be a bridging warrior. The question is, when you're going into those places that are difficult, that are challenging, to ask yourself, what is the gap? What is the gap between what you're doing here and how do you reach there? How do you bring the heart? How do you bring the love? And by going to that place of love, how do you bring in the curiosity to understand that the person that's coming at you is often coming from pain? So to have compassion for the pain and to understand that often the rage up here is really protecting the deep-seated fear down here, or the shame, or the isolation, or the disconnection, or the feeling of not mattering. And so what I would say in answering your question is, if you can see the humanity of the person, speak to that humanity, be curious about their story, and be curious about where those views, that anger, that rage comes from, that might be an opening. And with that, thank you.